You were in a period where hard assets really can be an advantage. Exposure to commodities is probably more important than ever. There really can be a hedge against inflation that typically have a high correlation with inflation. There's tight supply. We're seeing that right now, and that may get worse.
Welcome to another RTD interview. Today, I'm excited to have first-time guest, Mr. Rowland Howe, the president and director of Atlas Salt Incorporated. Ray is a chartered engineer with over 30 years experience in the salt industry. Today, he joins us to share his thoughts on the economy, his expertise in the mineral space, as well as possible opportunities in the mining sector. So, Rowland, welcome to RTD interviews.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to join me and sit down with me and share your thoughts on what's happening in the mineral space. And so, as I mentioned before we went live, I'm new to this, but I love to bring opportunities to the community in reference to things outside of the typical things we talk about, such as, commodities, gold, silver, things of that nature. Yep. But before we dive into just some of the details and get your thoughts on what's currently happening with the economy, for those who may not be familiar with you, can you give them a brief background as to your background and how you arrived at this point in your career?
Sure. What people probably don't appreciate is just how important salt is. And, I've spent over 30 years in the salt industry. I was operating a mine in the UK and then a mine in Canada, which is owned by Compass Minerals. And it's in Goderich, Ontario, and it's the biggest in the world. And providing salt primarily for de-icing purposes. And, when you get into a winter situation and you want to have bare highways and highways you can drive on, salt is the go-to commodity. And I'm not sure people really understand where it comes from. And it's mined and distributed all across North America and Canada. And, it's a fascinating, actually, product and something that really is underappreciated at the moment.
That was good. So I appreciate you for sharing that. And so one thing I want to get into is as far as more details in a minute. But before we dive into that, I'd like to lay some of the foundation as to why having, I guess, a diversified portfolio is important these days. And so primarily, as I mentioned, we talk about gold and silver, but then again, salt, I know it's been doing quite well. So I want to get your thoughts on that. But as a president, as well as an investor yourself, I guess, what are some things that you're keeping an eye on in reference to the economy that are worth bringing to the forefront?
Well, everybody's worried about, what's happening with inflation. I think it's starting to cool a little bit now. But we're in a period where hard assets really can be an advantage. Exposure to commodities is probably more important than ever. There really can be a hedge against inflation that typically have a high correlation with inflation. There's tight supply. We're seeing that right now. And that may get worse. We're seeing it domestically with high-grade rock salt that, is an important mineral, like I mentioned earlier, for de-icing highways and safe travel in winter. And in that case, actually, no new salt mines have been built for more than 20 years. So there's an imbalance there. But in terms of other commodities, obviously, the clean energy transition is still something that is very much to the fore. And it's going to need vast commodities, vast amounts of lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and other things. But salt comes into this space too, because when we talk about hydrogen, green hydrogen, it has to be stored, and one of the best ways to store it is in salt caverns, which I don't think people really appreciate just how salt caverns contribute to the distribution and storage of many gaseous products. So. It's something that I think what we're looking at is just, how can we make sure that we're in the right place and can provide, the commodities that, we feel are important.
Understandable. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the supply side of things. And so I'm not too familiar with salt. And so I've covered some lithium before, as well as, different other minerals. But, salt in general, is it something that's readily available within the North American region, or is it hard to come by? Are there many mines? Or give us some breakdown as to the salt industry itself.
Absolutely. Salt, it is ubiquitous. You reach for it on the table every day. It's part of life. But the salt that we're focusing on mostly is road de-icing, and that is mined. And there are a number of mines around the Great Lakes region in particular, and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And most of them are over 60 years old. They're old mines. And the key thing with salt is having the right distribution network, having the right logistics. Those mines I've talked about are doing really well. They've done what they can. They've upped their game, but there's still an imbalance. And to the east coast of the US, there's imports of 7 to 10 million tons a year, and they're coming from as far away as North Africa and Chile. So we got to be, heightened global tensions mean a lot of focus on these supply chains, and that's greater than ever, and probably will be in years ahead. So being able to have a new salt distribution point, mining and distribution point within this region, 700 nautical miles, say, from Boston, rather than having to rely on a supply from far offshore in a region that's probably not as stable as we'd like. So it can be seen as a national security issue. I mean, we're relying on risky regimes thousands of miles away, with unstable supply chains for something as simple as high-grade rock salt, which just doesn't make sense.
Interesting. Now, can salt be considered somewhat of an inflation hedge? And so, typically people run to the monetary side of things, monetary metals. But then again, salt, something new to me. And so, can that be, in your opinion, be something that people can use or look into further as a way to diversify, as we mentioned earlier, and as hedge against inflation? Because that is also a concern that people are still grappling with. So, what are your thoughts on that one?
I mean, salt is it's a purchase from that states and regions, municipalities, cities, they buy it to maintain their road network in winter. I mean, look what happened on I-95 near Washington recently. It was just paralyzed, and that's exaggerating and make an example of it, but it's needed, and it's a political decision whether you salt or not. So really, the pricing of salt is relatively stable. We've seen it go up consistently over the years, and that's one of the reasons we believe and we know that these salt mines, which last for generations and have very stable cash flow. So not only is it providing an ability for us to safely go about our lives and businesses, for investors, it really does offer a very good stable cash flow.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So let's dive in a little bit to Atlas Salt Incorporated. So for those who may not be familiar with it, give us some of the origins of the foundation of the company and some of the team and things of that nature. Give us some of the rundown as to what's happening.
So Atlas Salt is really, it's a spin out from a company that is known as Vulcan Minerals. But what we did was we took the salt assets so we could focus on those particularly. And my background in salt was something that people came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And when I saw the deposit we have on Western Newfoundland, I thought, this has a lot of the same DNA, same bones as the salt mine I operated in Ontario. I mean, it's got great geology, good reserves. It's close to deep water and right next door to a deep water port. So you've got the ability to start a new mine with advantages over existing mines and the ability to get it to market. And, obviously the imports we talked about earlier are something that, we could offer a shorter supply chain and a more stable supply network. But the Great Atlantic Salt deposit is something that's it's shallow enough that we can, we're proposing to access with inclined ramps rather than shafts, which most of the other mines have. We're looking to operate pretty much an electrically driven mine, which is great in a jurisdiction like Newfoundland because a lot of their power is actually hydroelectric. So it's green, it's got great green credentials. And that's reflected too in the shorter supply chain as well. We talked about the last mile, but if you're just shipping 700 nautical miles instead of 5,000 nautical miles, that has an impact. So Atlas Salt is working through a feasibility study to develop a new mine that will actually supply highway de-icing salt to the region, basically.
Interesting. Now I'm curious as far as technology and whatnot. Is the technologies used to mine for salt? Is it similar to every other commodities, or is it something specific that you guys use, or is it that cut and dry as far as getting into the ground and getting that salt up out of there?
Salt's a little different from some of the other commodities you probably cover. It's a soft material, and typically it's mined with what they call continuous miners, which basically they grind the salt out from the ground underground. Processing of salt is very simple. It's just crush it and screen it. There's no waste products. There's no wet processing. There's no tailing ponds. So we have a very small environmental footprint. We mine it, crush it, screen it, ship it. And that's very, very helpful in terms of people understanding what a salt mine is all about. It's a very small footprint on the surface. So, we believe that this is something that is very attractive to the region. And Newfoundland itself is a very attractive jurisdiction for mining. I think the Fraser Institute recently said they're like the fourth in the world in terms of being welcoming and proposing to encourage mining projects.
Another question: how do you guys think that you can position yourselves as a leader in the Northern American region when it comes to the salt industry itself? Anything that you guys can do that can separate you from the competition per se?
Well, we're creating a new mine with the best possible practices for the safest, most cost-effective, productive production. So, we want to be seen as doing the right things at the right time and providing a secure supply for the region for a product which, as we said before, is essential for safe winter travel.
Now, because I've got a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions running through my mind. But as far as the valuation of the company at this current moment compared to some of the other companies around your size or whatnot, how would you guys, compare yourselves to others if you could?
It's really hard. I don't think there are any direct comparable companies. There's one other publicly traded salt company, that Compass Minerals, and they produce salt as well as some other commodities too. That's the company I used to be with. They have a current market cap of about 1.4 billion. Their key asset being that Goderich mine we've spoken about. There's a lot of people who are coming into the industry, and Koch Industries, they just recently bought, invested in Compass. Cargill, which is another private company, they're invested in the salt sector. I think these guys know the value of low beta cash flow. And these mines, like I said before, they run for generations. Many of them over 60 years old now, and they're profitable. How often do you see that in a mine? And we're not aware of any other North American company that's actually taking a salt project through feasibility this time. So we're pretty unique. And I mean, you can look at what other companies are doing that generate stable cash. The valuation, it's something that I'm not the expert on that, but I can tell you that this is a unique proposition.
Understandable. Now, for those who might be interested in finding out more information, or just beginners and trying to understand the salt mining industry, what are some things that you would recommend for a newbie to get into, on what to look for, and how to really gauge if this is a good opportunity for them or not, based upon your history in this space and opportunity that lies ahead?
Totally take a look at our website, atlassalt.com. A lot of information there, and we've been doing a lot of work to try and communicate the value of salt, the utility of salt as a product, and just there's a lot of we know there's a lot of interest, but this is a premier undeveloped high grade salt project. You don't need to kind of understand a whole lot to know that this is something that is a game changer, really. So I just say look at that. Look at some of the other, Compass Minerals, perhaps. A lot of people who are actually dealing in salt, but it's a vast area, and we're seeing all these imports coming in from offshore. So ask yourself, what is better, to have a domestic, stable supply chain, or something that relies on deep sea shipping and sort of regions of the world that perhaps not stable.
Understandable. So, Rowland, can you share with us, I guess, a ticker symbol and things of that nature? You gave us the website. Of course, I'll put some information down below, but can you share with us some of those details as well?
Absolutely. So the ticker symbol is SALT, SALT. And certainly we're on the TSX Venture. That can be your start point. I welcome anybody to take a look and see what we're doing.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So, Rowland, thank you for joining me. Give us a rundown as to what's happening in the salt industry. Definitely, I've learned some things myself, so I appreciate you for taking time with us. And definitely, for those who are interested, I encourage you to do your research and to invest wisely. And other than that, look forward to having you guys back on in the future and seeing where you guys are at that point as well. But once again, thank you for joining me on RTD Interviews.
Happy to do that. Thanks very much, Mike.
All righty. Okay, that was informative. I appreciate you. Let me move this out the way.
Well,
yeah, I try to ask some questions relevant